I'm going to talk about Firebird replication using our replication tool called CopyCat. So first of all, thank you to the conference sponsors. Okay, and quickly about myself. My name is Jonathan Neve. I work MySQL Communications. We're a custom development software development company in France, and we've been using Firebird for a long time, since IB5. And I developed a product called CopyCat for replication, originally for IB6. Originally a custom development project in 2004, and since then it's evolved into other things. So there's no built-in replication, as you probably know, in Firebird currently, perhaps later. There are various third-party offerings, and what we have, our product is called CopyCat. So we offer it in actually several different forms. The main product is what we call CopyCat Developer. It's a Delphi application, a Delphi developer library component set. And we've this year come out with a new tool based on that component set, but it's for DBAs, so it's a ready-made tool called LiveMirror. And we are coming out with another one which will be basically a fully-fledged replicator, ready-made tool. LiveMirror, I'll explain later, but it's more specific. It's for hot backup solution. Anyway, that's just an overview. I'll go into details about mostly. So the idea is I'm going to focus mainly on CopyCat Developer, because that's kind of the core replication system that we offer. I'll give you a quick, I'll give you an overview, then I'll have a little case study of show a project we developed this year on Android tablets using Delphi, and then I'll explain a little bit about LiveMirror and data merge. So as I said, CopyCat Developer is a Delphi component library. We support various databases, primarily Firebird and Interbase historically, but we've also added support for a number of other databases, so you can mix and match between all the different combinations. Easy to configure and personalize that, because since it's a component library, you can, I'll show you later in the IDE, it's component and event based, so it's pretty, the advantage being that you can have customized, personalized replication logic in your code without having to recode the whole process from scratch. And yeah, conflict management, etc. I'll show a little bit more detail what that means in the case study afterwards. We handle various support transport layers. That means you can establish a connection. You don't have to use the direct Firebird or database, other database protocol over the network for security reasons or whatever, for performance reasons also. So you can set up this multi-tier system like this using SmartPC or DataSnap again recently, or RTC. That means you set up an application server that actually provides access to your database, running on the database server or web server or something, and then you connect to it, and then you'll be able to replicate through that, which can enable over-the-wire compression or encryption or whatever. We also have, along the same lines, that server-side backend that can be used for the transports. we've implemented that in several different languages so in order to add compatibility. For example, PHP, I wrote PHP backend specifically for MySQL, so that because we have it was actually custom development I did for one customer who had an Interbase database. We needed to replicate it with MySQL database he had of a PHP application that he had running. And so PHP server side gives access to the MySQL database, which we don't have otherwise access to, without having to open ports or create insecurity in that way. I'll just give a quick overview of what we've been adding recently. This year we added Oracle and PostgreSQL support. So the Firebird Conference, that's not really the topic, but anyway, it could. I imagine some of you may need also to interact with other databases, NexusDB. And more interestingly, we added support for the new final key framework that Embarcadero have come out with in Delphi, which means that you can take that onto mobile platforms. So, and various other improvements and bug fixes, which I have not listed yet. Okay. So I'd like to focus a little bit on a case study, just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do, and I'll show you a little bit of the code without not too much detail, but I'll show you in the ID what it looks like. This is an application that we made recently this summer for a customer of ours who have apple orchards. So they wanted a system for stock control. Mainly being able to take photos and type in information for each batch that goes into the fridges before they go into the fridges, so they can have an idea of the quality and the size of the apples and so on. And so we made them a system on tablets, Android tablets, which I'll show you in a minute. Using Delphi XE6 and FireMonkey. Okay, so stock information and photos are stored on the tablet. The photos are taken with the tablet, stored on the tablet in an SQLite database, because Firebird doesn't support those platforms yet. Would be nice. So we use SQLite. The application, the customer in question already has another application we developed for which uses the Firebird database on the server, and they have various information like list of apple varieties, producers, etc. And so on the tablet, they need information like that to come down from the server, and so the general information comes down from the server onto the tablets, and the information about the stock and the photos and stuff replicates up to the server, and so we merge the two databases as part of the two databases. There's a lot more information in the Firebird server that we don't need on the tablets. And there's some tables which replicate both ways. So that means we have to handle potential conflicts. And as I was explaining earlier, we use DataSnap because, again, there's no Firebird client for Android, so we can't directly connect to a Firebird database. So we use DataSnap, or you could use XML RPC or other options, which then allow you to basically communicate with an application server which is running somewhere on the network in order to give you access indirectly to the database connection. You can't do a direct Firebird connection from the Android tablet to your database server, but you can over HTTP if you're using XMRPC, or data snap. It's TCP/IP binary protocol, which in turn allows you also to support over-the-wire encryption, compression, and so on. I'll give you a quick demo. We've managed to project the screen from the tablet, so it should work. No. So this is the tablet I have here. Where is it? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is the application. So it's a very simple application. Here we have, when we open up, this information you see here comes from the SQLite database. So they can use it without a database connection because they seldom have decent Wi-Fi in fridges and stuff like that. So here they have the list of varieties. They click on a variety, they've got the list of different parcel plots and batches, whatever you call them in English. And you click on, okay, it's all in French, but anyway, you click on one of the batches and you have the various information that they put in about the quality of the apples, the size of the apples, etc. They can put comments and they can put photos, etc. So it's a fairly simple application. That's all there is to it, really. And then they click on synchronization here. And I'll show you in the ID what's behind the button, but basically it's extremely simple. When you press with synchronization, it connects to the Firebird server over the data snap connection. Connect also to the SQLite database, of course, and synchronize, replicate the two. So on the tablet, there's not much more to show than that. It's fairly simple. I'll give you a look of what it looks like in the code. Okay. The resolution's not so great, but so here we have replicator components, which encapsulates the replication logic. Got various options here. This is hooked up to, as you can see, the data snap transport here, data snap connection, and this then goes to the Firebird database. On the server side, as I said, you have an application running which is dead simple, just it's nothing more than a proxy to the database. So you have a data snap server, and you have a server component, CopyCat server component that just is just to provide a binding between the data snap server on one side and the Firebird connection on the other. Firebird, or of course it could be any other database with support. And here we have the SQLite connection. In both cases, CopyCat, of course, doesn't re-implement it. I didn't reinvent the wheel. So here I just have a link to, in this case, a Firebird connection. Here, this is DataSnap, and it links to the DataSnap connection here. And the low-level stuff, or the options specific to DataSnap or specific to Firebird, are obviously set in the Firebird connection here, or in the DataSnap connection. So that's it. So how does it work? You've got, basically, you've just got these two main components here. You've got the config component and you've got the replicator component. So that means the config component is, I can show you in the code, but it's used for setting up a database, because obviously CopyCat is trigger-based, so that means that you have to first create the triggers before you can replicate. Okay, so there's 3 lines of code here. Generate config, what that does is it rolls out the configuration which we actually have hard-coded here. It doesn't need to be hard-coded, of course, but for us, in this instance, it was simpler to do it like that. So we have 4 tables that have to be replicated. We simply list the 4 tables, and that means there'll be triggers created for all 4 tables. For each one of those tables, you can specify various options. We didn't need any here, but we could have put a condition, for example. So that's an SQL condition, which it can be any SQL condition as long as it's valid, obviously, which will then be inserted into the trigger that it gets created. So typically, for example, if you want to limit, if you have listed invoices or whatever in your table, and you want to limit it so that only specific nodes of your replication setup get specific rows, then you can put a condition here, so whatever makes sense, and handle it like that. In this instance, we didn't need to do that because this is the configuration of the SQLite database, and everything in the SQLite database has to go up to the server. On the server side, we do have conditions so that the data from the server only goes up to, or only goes down to the right tablet, so that each tablet only gets the data that corresponds to his producer, the producer he's attached to. Because it's actually a cooperative of producers, so they have a number of different producers that are part of it. Anyway, so that's it. Here you set up the options, and you call generate config in the code, and it'll connect to the database, create a few tables which CopyCat needs. I can show you what it creates, and then it creates the triggers, and that's it. And then at that point, the databases are ready to replicate. In fact, I can show you that. That would be interesting. Okay, that's one. So here, here's an example. These are the RPL dollar tables. That's the ones that CopyCat creates. I won't go into all the details because it's not interesting to get into the nitty-gritty. But basically, this is the main table, RPL log. You've got that's where basically the triggers work in a fairly simple way, except the devil's in the details, obviously. But when you create triggers using CopyCat on a table, it will basically just put a row in RPL log table for every change that occurred, multiplied by the number of nodes that you need to replicate towards. So that's defined in RPL users here. So in RPL users, you have the list of databases you want to send your changes to. There can be one database, or just one. Or in this instance, this is a copy of the server database. So here they have the list of all the producers that are supposed to receive the changes. And for every change, there'll be one row in RPL log for that user, for each user. And RPL log simply contains, well, the login is it's badly named, but it's the name of the node, the replication node, date, table name, key values, etc. Basically. So that's basically it, and there's lots of little. I can show you. Yeah, I can show you a trigger. Yeah. I actually have, as you might have noticed, I have two sets of triggers here simply because I have two configurations. I'm actually using CopyCat in two different ways here. In this database, all the changes are sent, are synchronized between the different producers since it's a cooperative. That's one thing. And then we added on to that the Android tablet one. But the conditions aren't the same, and the list of tables that are replicated isn't the same. Therefore, we actually create different triggers. But anyway, it's basically the same thing. So there you have it. I mean, I just get the value of the primary key, and I do a full select on RPL users. Joining here to get some configuration options. And here you have the SQL condition that was put in the code. So this is a custom SQL condition. Sorry, sorry, this one. Okay, this was a custom condition that was added, and this is just to filter it by producer so that each tablet receives only the data for the producer that it's attached to. And that's it, and then we force select on there and execute this procedure, which basically just inserts. It actually used to have a bit more intelligence in there, but now it just doesn't insert. Okay, so that's basically it on the configuration side. And then, so...
Show replicate.
Yeah.
No, the top left, you gotta go select the page for you. Yeah, should be there also. Tab control. Tab control. Tab control.
Yes, yes. Very easy to move with it. Okay. There we have it. So here, the synchronization button. The code is very simple. Here, okay, I put the code on the data module. And it's just basically one line of code here. I've got a progress window that I display. And then basically, as you can see, there's lots of events, and so you just call replicate to initiate the replication process. What it'll do is it uses the connections that you put in here. actually.
It's a real demo.
Yeah, it's a real demo, so I'm sorry. I know. Okay, right.
Why you show the
It's never happened to anybody else.
No, never. I recompiled a beta version just a few days ago because I was missing the component icons, which is an insignificant problem, but it probably calls it significant.
Why you show the live version?
Anyway, that's we don't have. I mean, there's not much more to show on it anyway, so I guess I'll leave it at that for now. Here, I was just going to show you have in the local node, remote node, you just link it up to the connection components, and you got lots of options, and then you got events that fire all throughout the replication process to allow you to customize it if you want to. You can fine tune it as much as you want. So you can, for example, get an event that fires for every row that's replicated. You can get the list of fields that it's going to be sent with the values. You can change the values. You can remove a field if you don't want it to be sent, and so on. In most cases, obviously, it just takes everything from one side and puts it on the other side. But in situations where you've got two data like this, where the two databases aren't identical, you may have fields on one side that are missing on the other because you don't want to encumber the tablet with that kind of stuff. And so anyway, you can fine tune it. But in the simplest case, it's nothing special to do. You just call replicate, and it will just take everything from one side and the other. So
which version of Delphi do you require?
Delphi 5.
No, I mean, would it work in XE6, but the Pro version? Do you need the RADStudio?
What are the? That's a good question. What are the limitations in the Pro version? This I think is
not everything.
We needed.
Everything in data snap is there. So
does data snap?
There is, but it's just partial.
Yeah, we don't rely on that.
Well, we don't require data snap unless obviously you're going to have a setup like this where it uses data snap. But you can of course use CopyCat without data snap, in which case it requires.
Can you do it with SOAP?
With SOAP, absolutely. Well, sorry, no. There's no. It would be theoretically possible, but it's not currently. That's not implemented. But there's an XML-RPC adapter which is implemented and which delivered with it. So if nothing else, you could use that, even on the Android
so
tablet.
You're not certain yet whether it will work with Delphi Pro?
I don't think we've ever tried that.
I need to test to be really sure, but I'm not quite sure what the limitations are. I think it would work because I don't use a lot of. There's not a lot of dependencies on the IDE, but obviously there are some.
We'll check that.
I'll look into that. I'm not sure. Okay, so
maybe you could show the live node for non-developers.
That's what, yes, that's what I'm going to do. So I'll go back to my presentation. Yeah, I just had a slide for give an overview of what we're planning to do soon. It's not exhaustive, but we're planning to add 3 Pascal and Lazarus support, definitely in this coming year. Metadata replication, so probably not using DDL triggers, though maybe, but I just mean currently we only synchronize the data where it's not so difficult to create missing tables or fields if necessary. Database versioning system, what I mean by that is we intend to push it a bit further so that you could have access to the back versions of the records. So currently we just store, if there's a change, I just store the primary key, and then at replication time I figure out whether we need to update it or delete it or insert it. I'm thinking of making it so that you could have a sort of what you could call a versioning system, kind of, like in a source code versioning system, whereby you could actually keep a backlog of kind of like an undo log, and you could be able to see for a specific record have the last 10 changes and see you know, this date such and such a field was changed, etc., and be able to roll back or revert changes to a specific record or a specific table or whatever. So that could be interesting. And most likely we should be able to get to that in 2015. The XE7 support, of course, and lots of other features which I'm thinking about, which we won't go into detail in right now. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, we also have developed a tool this year called LiveMirror. So unlike CopyCat Developer, it's not geared towards developers, so it's not specifically. So it's based on the CopyCat replication engine, which I just showed you. It was released this year, and it's designed for setting up hot backups. In other words, it uses replication to just make a one-way copy of a database, but since it's using replication and triggers, you can afford to synchronize very frequently. So for a small database, you could perhaps set up an hourly backup of a content task or something like that. But as databases start to get big, that becomes increasingly difficult. So if you want to have a reliable backup of your database to the minute or to the half hour, that becomes extremely difficult with databases that are several gigabytes in size, which is why we made this very simple tool, really, that just allows you to point to one database, point to a mirror database, which is just a copy of it, and just go, basically. And it will create triggers and for the tables. And you specify the frequency you want it to synchronize that, and it will basically just synchronize everything and keep the two in sync. That's the idea. So high frequency, I mean, potentially you can set the frequency you want, but with the idea of having reliable optimum backups. And of course it can be used for load balancing too, of course. It's one-way backup. I mean, a one-way replication system. Okay, so I'll give you a quick demo of that. A very quick demo. So I've set up two very simple databases here with one table. just for so we can do a quick demo. So just three fields: ID, name, and a date. Just so I can show you. I've got a copy of the database here, so it's identical. And we'll set up LiveMirror. Okay, I just installed LiveMirror.
Off the screen.
So when you first run it, if you don't have a configuration set up, then it asks you to create one. So we'll create a test configuration. We'll say, oh, I have it in French, unfortunately. I can change that. Wait a second. Okay, so test. Synchronization frequency, so whatever. We specify the path to the database. Okay. Okay, there's a few options, but by default it synchronizes all tables. And you just press OK, and yeah,
just trust us, yeah.
yeah, I should have created a license for myself. Never mind.
I'll just explain it.
Well, so yeah, anyway, I can at least show you this. So I created the metadata. Just when I do that, if we go back to our table, here, to our database here, we connect. Disconnect. Okay, so I got all these tables created, and I've got the triggers on my test table. If I add a table and I start, all you have to do is start and stop the service, and it'll redetect all the new tables and recreate the triggers for you and so on. Yeah, it's not going to let me do anything because I don't have the license. Yeah, trust us, it works. Sorry, I...
Say that it used to be called CopyCat.
Is it? No, it's not simple. No. Okay, well listen, go back to the presentation. There's a few more things to say, but so basically it's just a Windows service. It's dead simple. It just runs. You got a text file log, which if ever there's errors and stuff, you'll be written in. But you have a log of everything that replicates and goes over. So we're going to add Linux support because yeah, using C++, because yeah, obviously it would be nice to have that on your Linux server or whatever if that's what you're using for Firebird. As I mentioned before, metadata replication, well, for live mirror that's particularly useful. So you could just point it to a database and give it the path, and it creates the database, the mirror database for you automatically, and keeps the metadata up to date. Currently it doesn't, you have to manage that yourself. And so right now it's only Firebird. So ultimately it will support the database types we support, so Oracle, Postgres and so on. And yeah, I want to add some replication monitoring features, so be able to have periodic checks, like you know, once or twice a day, let's say, you run through all the tables or some of the tables, and you make sure that they're in sync, etc. Just extra monitoring features, so that if ever there's something wrong, or database connection isn't working, or it is working but there's some bug or something wrong, you can get alerts as easily and quickly as possible. Okay, just a few more minutes. would like to mention data merge, which doesn't exist yet, so it's kind of premature, but it's going to be released over the next few months. It's a fully fledged database replication tool, so it's basically going to expose everything that is available in CopyCat Developer, but try to make it accessible for, well, people who aren't Delphi developers. So with bidirectional replication, as simple as possible. Obviously, well, not as simple as LiveMirror, because LiveMirror is very focused and specific tool for doing one job. So, and conflict management, customizable, because I didn't show you, but in the developer components, you have an event that fires when a conflict is detected, so you can implement your own custom scheme or do whatever you want, depending on the table or depending on whatever makes sense for you. So in data merge, I'm going to do something similar and make it so you can define by table, by node, as sophisticated as possible. I mean, as fine-grained management as possible in case of conflict. And as I said, also for LiveMirror, I'm going to do the same thing for data merge, replication monitoring, so that you can, so that it's reliable, so that you can be sure that it's reliable, and you have alerts and reporting if there is a problem or a difference between the two databases. And of course, it will support all the database types that are supported by CopyCat. And that's it. So I don't know if there are any questions. Yeah?
You just mentioned on the last screen customizable conflict management.
Yes?
What options are you considering? Because it's not kind of standardized area.
So the simplest, well, for starters, you will be able to customize per table, like to be able to say for a specific table, like for this table, you always give priority to this node, and for this other table, always to the other node. That was basic. Then it can also be based on the timestamp, but that's pretty limited. There's going to be also, I'm not sure, maybe not immediately, but there was going to be a possibility of merging records if there are changes that didn't touch the same fields, but that's optional because it doesn't always make sense. But if you have the same row change in both databases and they didn't touch any of the same fields, then we could potentially merge those. And if all else fails, the way it works is it gets put into the conflict gets logged into a table, RPL $table conflicts, and it's available for manual resolving. But obviously, you want to limit that as much as possible, otherwise it's unmanageable. But if there's some very sensitive tables, you could decide that for that specific table, you don't do anything automatically. And yeah.
It must work online, so you must have internet connection between your master database and your replica database. So it can't work offline, because I have come across a number of cases when, for example, in construction industry, companies, they have quarries, and these quarries, they are somewhere in the field where nothing, no internet connection, even in the most developed countries. No, and but the software has to work there. What they have to do, they have to register transactions, and then periodically they write these all changes on the USB and have to go to a central office drive and replicate there.
Yeah. Yes, but typically you would have on the laptop or whatever they're using in the field, you would have a copy of the database. When you go to, with your USB key, you take your database on the USB key and you replicate at that point. So then at that point you have a connection. When you replicate, you need a connection to both databases, but obviously that doesn't mean you have to have a connection to both databases when you're using your database. So you can very well accumulate changes when you're in the field, and then when it comes time to replicate, you use your USB key and or network or whatever and put them together. No, CopyCat doesn't handle the possibility of
Changes fine.
like, yeah, but it's all
sent maybe by very slow channel email. With big database it can be gigabytes.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But with a list of changes during the day, it's not that big. It's controllable, you know. Make it once an hour, once a week, once a day.
No, that's not. That doesn't.
And changes back the same way.
Well, the difficulty with that is conflict management, but yeah.
But we had to implement this. We have implemented this
Okay.
for such content because it's one of our budget markets and we just had no choice. It could seem very funny problem in the modern war, but it's a reality.
Yes, yes.
But isn't it similar to your org example?
Yes. The only difference, I guess, is that periodically they'll take the tablet where they have Wi-Fi and press synchronize. Whereas what you're saying is they'll just take it with USB key, just a list of changes.
Yeah, or in a different case, you have a channel, but very slow channel. You can send all the data, but very small file with the changes you can send.
Well, if you have a connection, even if it's slow, you can replicate directly over it. And since you won't be sending the whole database, you'll just be replicating the changes. It should also work. Especially if you use something like DataSnap or XML RPC, because it allows, well, it avoids having the Firebird network protocol directly over the internet. And we also I tried to bunch up the data as much as possible, so to avoid lots of unnecessary packets. So on a slow network, it's much better.
How does CopyCat handle primary key violations? I mean, you have to have different ranges of primary keys in the master detail database. I'm talking about the developer version first.
Yeah.
So you need to adapt your databases to get their primary key in a certain way. You cannot just immediately put the CopyCat on top of it.
It depends what you absolutely, it depends what you're using. If you're using integer primary keys with a generator or something like that, then yeah, obviously you have to do something.
It's not a CopyCat problem. You replicate, and if the primary key exists, you would just overwrite the data.
Yeah. Yeah, because we consider that it's the same row in that case. We do have a system, but and it can be used if it's if you have an existing database that you can't remodel. We have a system that allows you to synchronize, as it were, primary keys, but it's delicate. It's a delicate sort of thing, and it's much better if you can design your application so that the primary keys are always unique. But there is a system in CopyCat that can allow you to do that. But you would still need to change your primary keys to something that doesn't conflict with the definitive one. So, for example, you could when you insert your rows, you could use a negative value of the generator or something like that. Just something which would be unique in your local database, but not conflict with the. And then when you replicate, you get the generator value from the server, and update it locally onto the source database, and then you'll be okay. CopyCat handles that, but
when you mentioned you have different transport layers, that means that probably the CopyCat server does not need to necessarily expose to the internet more than what's necessary. So, what do you have? Like, I would have this tablet running on a 3G connection, if possible, without a VPN, so that it doesn't make it too complex on the tablet side. So, do you have something that is secure enough to publish on the internet?
DataSnap is pretty good if you have it, because it's it allows conversion, and I haven't used it myself, but I think they have plugins you can hook up to it through encryption.
Does it work over HTTPS?
It can work over HTTP,
Yes.
and I'm not sure about HTTPS, but maybe. But the way I've used it has been a binary protocol, TCP IP.
So maybe it's still best to just use a VPN and forget about everything.
Do that too.
Industry standard for security, and just forget it. Yeah, but then you have to play with the device, with the tablet. Otherwise, you publish your application on Google Play, download it, and it works. If you have to deploy it to 50 tablets. All right.
Before everyone leaves, I wanted to, well, thank you for attending, and I just wanted to mention we're offering a discount for people who came to the conference. So if you are interested, you can use the coupon code that's on the screen now. And 15%. Are there any more questions? It's time for the next session.
Okay.